Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast.
All right, so here we are at Inner Solar, and we have Peter Greenberg. So just get all your Peter Greenberg fans out there in the audience and make sure you're listening really hard right now. And hey, John Craig, what's up? You know, we know that you're listening, that's for sure. And John works for Peter, that's why we know. And so Peter is famous because he hates rapid shutdown. He's the most anti-rapid shutdown person out there that doesn't have purple hair. Does that sound about right?
Reasonable.
And so we know that Solar Boy is, or I shouldn't say like anti-all rapid shutdown, but like electronics in the array. Is that what you're against?
Yeah.
And you do have a badge, right? I remember one time you were like coming around with a badge, like a fire badge or something like that.
I was a firefighter paramedic for 10 years.
I thought maybe like you got that at the store when they sell them over in Safeway or something, you know, for the kids. It wasn't an official looking badge. Like I'd be afraid if like I was sitting in my car and somebody came up with a big old metal badge like that, I would just like, you know, put my hands up or something.
I've been official on it. Albany Fire Department in Albany, Oregon. Worked for 9 years and was a volunteer for a year and a half before that.
Yeah. Okay. And so I met Peter many, many years ago, at least 15 years ago, and I was doing a class for, I think it was Greenwich Solar?
Yes.
Yeah. And so we did a solar cross the country tour, and one of the places that we went to was Portland, I think. And I met you at some hotel in Portland, and then later you hired me to come and train your company.
Yeah.
And so we had like kind of a good experience working together. And I've just seen you at all the shows. If you ever seen a guy going around, a real tall guy with shorts on at a solar show, that's probably Peter. We've even hung out in China before at the SNEC show and all that. So you see Peter in all these different places. And the name of your company is EnergyWise, right?
Yeah, EnergyWise Services.
Yeah. And so you do a lot of, can I tell them about how you got all the rebates?
Sure.
Is that like against the
Sure.
rules? Okay, this is a really interesting story. And let me know if I get it wrong. And if I do get it wrong, I like my story better anyway than the real one. But it was something like there's these rebates in Oregon. And if you signed up, you know, like at a certain time, like they go like, okay, 8 a.m. or whatever it is, and you've got to fill out all these forms online, and then you get the rebate. You reserve the rebate. So you hired a classroom full of people and you trained them, and you got special software. You could have like multiple people filling out the same form, and you got every rebate reserved. Is that right? Something like that?
Yeah, it was a feed-in tariff program in Oregon. And
okay, so it wasn't a rebate, it was a feed-in tariff. Okay.
And we got about 30% of the spots, and it was a combination
I thought you got 100%.
No, it was a combination of a lottery, a bid, and who could type the fastest, which they gave up on after a couple of times, but we kind of mastered the who could type the fastest part with some simple programs, really. And we were basically racing against, from what I understand, the University of Utah computer program and Microsoft engineers, and we won.
So how did you get that together? Like, I think, what, do you got a classroom full of people, something like that?
In one of the ones I hired about 30 kids, and they each had there was 2 of them per keyboard, and one was typing the information, one was telling them the information, and then we linked together 10 computers, and the kids were a backup, you know, for a fast system, but it was basically an auto key system we set up. We knew what information they wanted, and you know, instead of typing in the city, you know, we type in Control-C, and the city would type in automatically. We pre-programmed the data.
And so that worked pretty good. How did anybody else get anything? You had all that going on.
Well,
you just kind of let them?
No, I mean, we got what we got, but...
And then you had to buy all this hardware or something like that too, like computer hardware to make it happen? Or?
No, there's mostly software. There was a little bit of hardware. We set up a website to practice, and it was pretty silly.
Yeah, it does sound pretty silly, and it kind of goes to show you like what it was like in the earlier days of solar with like rebates. And you said it was a feed-in tariff?
Yeah.
And a feed-in tariff, which is like a certain amount of money for the energy that you make for a certain amount of time, often 20 years, something like that.
15 years, and we did well.
Yeah, so that made you the solar king of Oregon. I think, pretty much.
Well, we didn't have the most projects, but the most profitable projects.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's always.
And we still have a bunch of them going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember I saw you up there in Oregon during the eclipse too. We were hanging out there a little bit. So that was crazy. The moon getting in front of the sun and all that, total eclipse, making a big old shadow across this planet. And so it kind of goes to show you, like in the earlier days, like they call it the solar coaster, and you think it might be like up and down. Now it was even more up and down, I think, then. And so it's just like volatility. And maybe what they did is they gave people too much. I think a lot of times, like in Pennsylvania and Oregon and different places, and especially like Ontario, Canada, with their feed-in tariff, it was like they were giving people such a good incentive. They could have taken that same amount of money and given people half as much, and twice as much would have been installed.
You could say that for a lot of things. It's tough to make good legislation or programs, that the contractors want the most they can get out of it. The legislatures want what they want, but it's basically tough to make a program that keeps making sense without changes over the years.
Yeah.
And you could say the same for the federal tax credit. It's certainly been abused by, some of these door-to-door companies, but
it gets it started. I met a guy named Hans Josef Fell. Have you heard of him?
No.
He invented the feed-in tariff in Germany, and he worked with Hermann Scher. Hermann Scher was kind of maybe a little bit more famous, but Hans Josef Fell, he started it like in his own little community. I forget how much it was, but it was just like the whole feed-in tariff had I don't know if it was like 20 kilowatts or something was the whole program, something like that in this little town. And he got off grid, and that's kind of what got him into politics. But it's super, super nice guy. I'll put a link to the show with him in the show notes. But yeah, it's been a solar coaster. And one of the things that I've seen that was a good way to do incentives to get things going is where it tapers off. And we had that with the California Solar Initiative with our jolly green governor, or the governator, whatever you call him. And it actually started before he was governor, but it tapered off. So there was a good amount, and then as that was used up, it just went down slowly. So it was good to sign up early, but then the price of the equipment goes down, and people get better at doing it. So it gave people an incentive, but it wasn't just like this big cliff that you drop off where it's like a 30% difference overnight. Those things aren't so good. So yeah, we're at InterSolar right now, and I was just a judge. And if you're on YouTube, you can see people in the background that are doing solar games where, one of these companies is going to win.
This podcast was brought to you by Air. Take a breath and experience air yourself. Don't forget to breathe.
So let's talk about your favorite thing and Peter Greenberg also has this shirt that shows different module level electronics that get fried. And so that's kind of fun too. And then the other thing too is one of those jobs, I guess, was the Boys and Girls Club of Corvallis, Oregon.
Yeah.
And that was one of the jobs too with the feed-in tariff. Is that right?
No.
Oh, it was a different job.
Yeah.
And so you did a job and something caught fire, and it was like a rapid shutdown device.
The rapid shutdown
and
device.
just as a reminder too, they didn't invent rapid shutdown to prevent fires. They invented it for firefighter safety. But tell us about why you hate rapid shutdown and you think it sucks.
Well, the interesting thing about that fire, first, it was right next to a fire station, which was being remodeled at the time. But a firefighter's wife was driving by, noticed the smoke, and called the fire alarm in.
So that's why it's good to marry a firefighter.
But also at that same club, we had an older system that had been in for 10 years without rapid shutdown units. It's been operating fine, and there really hasn't been any much of a history of fires in solar systems. I guess there was one a long time ago in Bakersfield, but the inverters have gotten much safer, looking at the negative and the positive side of the equation and arc faults, and it was really just good lobbying by Enphase that brought us it. It sounds good on paper, to cut down the voltage, but the rest of the world doesn't use this. And I was a firefighter for 10 years before all this, and basically with a solar fire, you stand back, you hit it with a fog nozzle, and nobody in their right mind should be walking in the midst of 600 volts or 1,000 volts and assume that the safety equipment works. You have to assume that the safety equipment doesn't work in a fire. And that's the way people do it all over the world. And basically the more electronics of any kind that you have in, the more problems you're going to have. Whether, our fire was 2 years after the installation from the equipment, and then after that we found multiple other rapid shutdowns at other sites that had problems with bubbling from internal components that were different components than what caused the fire. And we've also had problems with other manufacturers, and Generac had their large share of, I think it was a 50% failure. Germany did a study a couple years ago, I think of 30 gigawatts of solar systems over like 20 or 30 years, and they had a few hundred fires. The large percentage of that, or maybe not a large percentage of the total, but a decent amount was from thin film systems. And then Australia's had some fires from a mandated DC string level shutdown that were, I guess, substandard, and after a couple years they got rid of that. But we really haven't had problems in the past. And the main thing is, from what I understand, the National Fire Reporting System, there's no specific category for solar fires since there's so few of them. So there's really no way of telling what problems are out there. Heliovolt has done a good job in looking at big systems and noting issues, and overall the main problems are in the connectors, mismatched connectors, poorly made up connectors, and by using module level electronics, most Chinese solar panels, even though they say they're compatible with the connectors with MC4s, and compatible is not a UL term or a tested thing. People are just adding in a lot of connectors. So, no matter what electronics you have, if you don't have MC4s, you're just increasing the chance of having a problem. If you have module level equipment, you're increasing it significantly. The module level rapid shutdown units, they're hard to find where you do have a problem. You simply see an arc fault and you don't know where that is. We've had to test individual strings, and we're getting 60 volts on a string where you should be getting 4 or 5. So we know there's an issue, but then to find, what unit has failed in a sea of solar panels that could be attached to a roof is a very difficult thing. So, it wasn't a good idea. It's unnecessary. It adds complexity, expense. It's difficult to find a problem, and from a firefighter standpoint, you just shouldn't be in the midst of solar panels fighting the fire.
Yep. Okay. And so you're mentioning MC4. That's Multi-Contact is a brand, and so MC4 Staubli owns Multi-Contact, and they click into each other. They're like,
right.
They have like male and female and polarity and all that kind of stuff. And then there's a lot of different companies that make things that click into them, but they weren't perhaps tested together,
right.
but they fit together.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that people point out. And then another thing is when you have the module level electronics like microinverters and DC to DC converters, often called optimizers, or just a rapid shutdown device that just turns it off, you're doing an extra set of connectors because each module is connected to something else. So you're doubling your amount of these connectors. So you're doubling your chance of something happening, I guess. Maybe
and all of those products use Staubli MC4s where, almost all the solar panels don't. So you're just doubling, tripling the amount of connections you have.
Yeah, and another thing too is if you go and cut the cord on a solar module and you put on a better connector, you violate the warranty. So you can't really do that unless maybe you would have permission from the manufacturer to do something like that. But they do have, what do you think about things like AC modules where they have the inverter that's kind of built into the solar module, or even a smart module where
I have that in one system, but still if it fails, you're out of luck, and basically I like the concept of if something fails and the company goes out of business, you should be able to fix it. And if you have proprietary wiring and cabling and even microinverters versus string inverter that you can buy from anybody to replace it, I'd much rather use a string inverter where you can replace the device and easily, quickly, inexpensively, and it doesn't matter if the company stays in business. It doesn't matter what the warranty is if the company's not around.
Yeah, and there's pretty much two different types of rapid shutdown. There's one of them that's module level shutdown, and so you put some electronics behind each solar panel, solar module, and that's the one I know that you're against, that you don't like that. And then there's UL 3741 is allowing people to do array level shutdown. if you have a system that's listed to do that. And are you against array level shutdown? Like as a firefighter, do you think they should just get rid of rapid shutdown altogether, or just let people do UL 3741 or array level shutdown?
Well,
if you were in charge of the world.
UL 3741, it's not specifically array level shutdown. It depends on how it's tested. Some, you can have an inverter within a foot of the array, and as long as you have no more than a 2-foot gap between the racking, it can do a whole array, and then the array is one big boundary that's 1,000 volts in terms of a commercial system. If you have, uncontiguous separate areas, then you have to have, depending on the racking testing and how they went about it, either module level shutdowns or array level shutdowns. But basically, I think the least amount of electronics in a difficult place that's expected to last 25 years, that gets hot, cold, moist, freezing, you want the least amount possible.
So do you think that they should get rid of rapid shutdown altogether, or just let people do array level shutdown?
I think they should get rid of it. We really haven't had issues in the past, and we're making a lot of issues that are going to haunt us for decades to come. The companies are going to go out of business, the installers are going to be long gone, the insurance companies are going to get pissed. We're going to cause a lot more fires than any issues with firefighters that shouldn't be in an array to begin with.
No. Yeah, and it seemed like it was more strict with rapid shutdown, and it's kind of loosened up a little bit with the UL 3741 systems allowing, string level shutdown and stuff like that. And there's also talk about the 2029 National Electrical Code where they will up the voltage from 80 volts to 165, so perhaps we could put 3 modules in series. So that's like part of the way there for you, maybe.
I suppose it was good lobbying by Tesla, but still, you're putting in devices, you're just putting in a lot of electronics, you expect them to last forever.
Yep. So you are of the theory that there's these companies like Tesla and Enphase that are buying out people.
They have good lobbying.
Yeah, good luck.
They want to sell their product. And the concept makes sense on paper if everything works perfectly, but electronics don't work perfectly, and nobody should expect them to work perfectly for 25 or 30 years.
So who's more important, a corporation or a person?
It depends what side of the stockholder you're on, or,
Yeah, because, like with the tax credits, now we have corporate tax credits, but not person tax credits.
Right.
So maybe we should all become corporations. Maybe what we should do is, like, as soon as your kid is born, they get a birth certificate, and then we could put like their corporate ID on it or something.
Yeah, we should get rid of that rule that made corporations people, basically.
Corporate personhood. Yeah. Yeah, and so like money is speech, right? But giving money to politicians is free speech.
We need to get money out of politics, that's for sure.
So that means corporations can pay politicians. Yeah.
Oh, unlimited money.
Yeah. Like that was like the money is speech thing.
Yeah. But I know of lots of companies that are taking out the rapid shutdowns, conforming to, modifying its system to conform to UL 3741 to make it safer.
What do you think about all those people that want to have cell level rapid shutdown? So you have like 72 rapid shutdown devices inside of each solar module.
Again, the least amount of electronics, the better.
Okay, I'm kidding about that.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of anybody getting shocked by a single solar module. Have you?
No.
Like, I'm sure like if during open heart surgery you shorted out a solar module on somebody's heart, it probably could hurt somebody. But just like one solar module on somebody's finger or something, it's like, I don't think anything's going to happen.
Right.
Like the most dangerous thing about a single solar module would be dropping it on your toe.
Yeah. I've had one fly off a roof in a mini tornado once.
Oh, yeah?
Miraculously didn't hit anything. I was amazed.
Yeah. So a mini tornado in Oregon.
Yeah.
I didn't know they even had those up there.
And Newburgh, Oregon.
Yeah.
Came to inspect the system that we owned, and like, what's going on, And
one time I was at Burning Man riding a bicycle, and there was this thing called a dust devil.
Yeah.
And it's like sort of like a mini tornado, and I drove right into it, and I followed it until it stopped, and it stopped at this camp called Oz. Is that weird or what?
Over the rainbow.
So, yeah.
But yeah, it's a big problem.
Uh-huh.
And it's going to be a bigger problem, as the years go on and devices get old.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's Solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
So what are you doing? You have to follow the rules, and what are you doing with your systems that had the problem? So like the Boys and Girls Club, is that still going right now?
We spent about $20,000 and basically had to move our DC wiring. The DC wiring has to be within a foot of the array, which I guess to code makers, a foot sounds better than 10 feet, but the DC doesn't care. But we had to move a whole bunch of wire. We moved a few solar panels so we contained the contiguous rules, and that was it.
Yeah. Because that's kind of some bad press, for your company. You install a solar system and it's on a Boys and Girls Club and it catches fire and probably your name gets associated with it or something like that. And
yeah, we fixed it. It wasn't our fault.
Yeah,
but we
well,
fixed
that's
it.
why you hate rapid shutdown so much.
Yeah,
because of that. So
I think it's a bad idea. I think it sounds good on paper, but it's a bad idea in reality.
So what do you do with that system? Are you still using module level electronics on it?
No.
So you went and switched to like a UL 3741 system, and then you have array level shutdown. Are your inverters on the roof, I guess? Is that how?
For all our commercial ones.
Uh-huh. What kind of system are you using these days?
Soulless string inverters, for the most part.
And so then what you pretty much have, like the string inverter is within the array boundary, and you have a certain kind of rack, and you install it a certain way, and you follow instructions, and then when you initiate rapid shutdown, you push a button somewhere downstairs or flip a breaker or turn off the power to the building, and it turns off everything up to the inverter.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then
it's no different than the old days.
So that would have cost you some money. You had to take all those modules, throw away all those module level devices.
About $30,000 we spent.
About $30,000. And then what do you do with your old devices that you don't like anymore?
Actually, NREL friend talked them into doing a study on rapid shutdown devices, and I sent them a few hundred devices from different systems we had taken out and some new ones I had, and they were just about to start the study, and then the guy in charge got laid off last week.
Oh, bummer. Yeah. Does that have something to do with they changed it to the laboratory of the Rocky Mountains?
It has something to do with Trump hating solar.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you wish he loved solar? You think?
I wish he wasn't president, but
he might change his mind. He might start loving solar.
If the solar industry gave him a lot of money, then he would love it. But
okay, everybody,
there's no
remember, corporate personhood. Have your corporation. You guys aren't giving enough money to Trump. Then he'll love solar, right?
It seems to be that's what he operates on.
Maybe his buddy Elon will give him a bunch of money, and then he'll want solar again.
It's understandable why he hates wind, because the wind industry dared to put wind outside of his golf course in Scotland 25 years ago, and he didn't like the look of it. And he went to the Supreme Court of Scotland or England, and they told him to piss off. And so he's been against wind ever since, for personal reasons.
Maybe because solar people are kind of in with the wind people. Maybe that's why he doesn't like solar.
I think if you understood how the man thinks, you'd be in trouble.
All right. And then that reminds me of, I did a podcast recently called Why Republicans Love Solar. And so I think that Republicans should love solar. And I think if Trump listened to that podcast, he would love solar. Because there's all these Republican reasons why people should love independent energy. And to be depending on the grid. And the grid is like a community of electrons. Community is the word for communism.
There's been studies, that solar is just as popular in red states, like Utah, as it is in green states like Oregon. And, everybody hates the utility company. Everybody wants to be more independent. Everybody wants to cut down on their costs. So, it's not something that's trickled from the bottom up. It's just Trump doesn't like it for whatever strange reason.
So you have all of these module level shutdown devices.
Yeah.
and you don't know what to do with them.
Right.
So if we have any listeners that want some, will you give it to them?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So you heard it here first. You got free solar equipment.
I wouldn't recommend it, but
Yeah, well, somebody did. I mean, you could probably sell it on eBay or something.
I wouldn't want to.
Yeah, or just like, you can do research with these things. I wonder what would happen if you plugged a solar module into an optimizer and just like put triple the amount of optimizers. Would it still work?
Well, I've actually done some testing, and the rapid shutdown units are supposed to cut down the voltage to half a volt or 1 volt, depending on the manufacturer. And I've seen ones where the device has failed and you're getting the full module voltage through it. So they're failing the wrong way, which isn't a good idea at all. So we've gone back and tested we turn off the inverter, we test the strings, and we're getting 50, 60 volts where you should be getting 3 or 4 volts. So then you have a bad rapid shutdown in the string. And then you also have to actually open up the inverter, which is dangerous. And the SunSpec protocol, in the first 5 minutes when you turn the inverter, the rapid shutdown isn't turned on. So you have to go through every string and turn on and off the inverter, test each string to make sure you're getting the full voltage. So you have to test the strings when they're off, you have to test the strings when they're on, and repeat that. So, and all is you got an arc fault from your inverter. So it's very difficult to find where these things are.
Yeah, now they're coming up with new stuff for energy storage systems, and it's not called rapid shutdown, it's called emergency shutdown. And so we're having to turn off our batteries depending on which version of the NEC you're working with.
Unfortunately, Midnight Solar had a string level shutdown, and they've been in that business of products like that for a long time, but they made a mistake and it only went to 12 amps. And most modern solar panels are 13, 14 amps, and I just happen to have a lot of 10 amp modules, 9.6. So I used a lot of them, but they recently just stopped making that device.
Yeah, I remember when I first came up there and worked for you in Oregon, you took me to some different jobs, and one of them I think you had like really old SMA inverters. Were they even like 120 volt inverters, something like that? But I just remember there those old red SMA inverters.
Very, very few.
Really small inverters, but I thought...
Yeah, very few of those.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, it's been great talking to you, Peter Greenberg. Any famous last words? I think that like your solar career is very interesting. And I remember too that you started off doing lighting in embassies or something, right?
I put in energy efficient lighting, and for a couple of years I got a gig as a contractor to the State Department. We went around the world changing lights in embassies and making the embassies more energy efficient, and worked in 14 countries, traveled to a bunch of countries around there, and Trump wants to shut down embassies and get rid of the State Department pretty much now, but into a lot of countries.
And so too, like when you were doing this stuff for like energy efficiency with light bulbs, I think that might have given you an edge when solar came around because you were good at going after incentives.
Yeah.
And that, in fact, the name of your company still is related to the light bulbs, right? Like EnergyWise?
EnergyWise Lighting, and now we're EnergyWise Services.
Yeah, so that's kind of like an interesting pathway that you had into solar and learning how to get incentives with light bulbs.
Yeah, just a little history.
So at first you were taking electricity to make light, and then you take light to make electricity. Maybe you should have just done nothing and you'd be in the same place.
Well, looking back over, 16 years or whatever, between the lighting and the solar, we saved about 110 million kilowatt hours a year cumulatively with the lighting. We manufactured high bay fluorescent lighting for years, which have now been replaced by LED. And then the solar, we've put in about 12 megawatts, and this is with like 6 people at the most of employees. And I've seen companies with 100 people that have put in twice as much as me. And also, I've used about 20 products where I was the first customer over the years. I was the first customer of Game Change, and we put in a Cubotics and Tank Solar and a lot of strange stuff over the years.
I remember that Tank Solar, 10K, Tank, whatever. It was like really cool. It had like reflectors and repeating rows. Yeah. I saw that with you on one of your jobs. And then they had like, what was it? The inverter was built into the.
Well, they had
no, the inverter was.
There
was
right.
electronics built into it of
Right,
some way.
electronics.
Like
built
the solar modules had like little lights on them,
Yep.
and then there was like a low voltage inverter
Yep.
that you parallel everything into this inverter.
Had a lot of good ideas, but eventually the inverters kind of failed and they went out of business.
I wonder if that was the voltage low enough that it would have
Yes.
complied with rapid shutdown?
Yeah, actually they were in parallel. There was a big trunk cable.
Yeah, like it was just like you put a whole bunch of modules in parallel, which would
Yeah.
be like module level shutdown, or
Right.
like get the voltage below 80 volts.
But they were really too steep. The reflector didn't quite work, and it was a very unique system. And
maybe they should bring it back. No.
Yeah, they tried.
Sometimes you're ahead of your time and you're too early.
Well, the whole feed-in tariff concept, we were limited by the kilowatts, but we were paid by the kilowatt hours. So, we were interested in making the most energy we could, and that's how we got hooked up with Game Change, and we were their first customer, their first tracker, and
Cool.
now they've done, tons of gigawatts. And
That's giga cool. All right. Well, thanks so much,
you.
Peter Greenberg, and thanks for listening to Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. To get yourself solar smart, go to SolarSEAN.com, and you can take classes like Peter and Peter's company did from me.
can't go wrong with Shawn. He's the man.
All right. Thanks a lot.